the United States of America could not hold itself from pulling India because the Prime Minister of our country visited Moscow and met with the President Vladimir Putin. Now, the United States of America has warned India, saying that Russia is not its all-weather ally, and if given a chance, Vladimir Putin will end up choosing China over India. In fact, the United States of America ambassador to India has gone on and said that India should not have its relationship with the United States of America for granted. And at the same time, there has been at the UNGA a resolution that has been passed where India has abstained. And as per the resolution, they have demanded Russia once again for a ceasefire in the war against Ukraine that has now gone on for 3 years straight. So my question over here is that under the garb of a warning that has been issued by the United States of America, it is once again trying to influence India. Despite every effort that has been made by India to work in its self-interest, over the statements that have been several times made by S. Jaishankar that the world does not revolve around Europe and the problems of the West, and India has a mind of its own, and so do the other countries that it involves itself in. Let's start our conversation. Joining me on the telecast, first of all, is Ray Locker. He's an author and a presidential historian. He's joining me from Washington, D.C. And Ray, how should we interpret these couple of statements that come from the U.S.? Number one, the U.S. State Department warns India, says that Russia will choose China over India if it comes to that. And then we have the US Ambassador to India saying that we should not take India-US ties for granted. But do you think India is taking US for granted?
No, I don't. And I don't think the United States is trying to tell India what to do. I think it's obvious on the face of it, if given the choice between India and China, Russia would take China. It's a fellow dictatorship, basically. India is a very pluralistic democracy with a long tradition. So it would seem that, that the Indian system and the Russian system don't really fit well together, despite their history of working together in the past. Look, I think Prime Minister Modi is a grown-up. He's doing things that help India. I don't think by going to Moscow, he's doing anything that he shouldn't be doing. India is the world's most populous nation, and it doesn't really need to be listening to anybody else as it decides what to do with its future. And I think the United States knows that. When we're setting up in a NATO conference, when the United States is talking with its European allies about what's happening in the world, it's only logical that they would look at Russia and say, hey, watch out for these people. So I don't think what was said in the last few days was untoward, and it makes sense to me.
Okay, but do you also feel that the commentary that comes from the West is heavily tilted towards their self-interest, and there is a projection of how the state of affairs are, particularly when it comes to Ukraine and Russia and the conflict that goes on, which is heavily in favor of the West, of NATO, of Ukraine. There is always another side to the story.
Right, and I think the people on the other side realize that. I mean, nation states do what they have to do. They speak out in their own self-interest. If they don't, who else is going to do it for them? And so it's only logical that the United States and its NATO allies do that. But it's also logical for them to not assume that just because they say something, India or other nations are going to jump and do it. I think those days are long over, if they ever really existed.
Okay, but again, the question, there has been no effort that has been left. And I say it because this happened at the start of the Ukraine-Russia war 3 years ago, and India had started importing oil from Russia and defense equipment from Russia. And there were time and again several repeated, I wouldn't say warning signs, but pressurization that had happened from the US on India, asking virtually to stop these trade deals with Russia. And again, my point, when all countries are working for their self-interest, whether it is US, or you talk about Russia, or we talk about India and talk about China, or any country in the world, why is there an expectation and a position that US stays that everything they think and everything they do and every ideology that they put forward is for the quote-unquote good of the world?
Well, that's the U.S. tradition. I mean, that's what the United States believes, whether it's
but
realistic
so does,
or not.
Suppose I could say this is the tradition of India because we're the largest democracy of the world. We have never ever fought a war. We have never invaded a country. We have propagated the message of brotherhood. The other day, the Prime Minister, while he was in Austria, said that we have brought Buddha to the world, not Yudh. Yudh meaning war, and Buddha is Gautam Buddha, who preached the message of peace.
Well, you get no argument from me on that. I mean, I don't think anybody really in the world, with the exception of Pakistan, is afraid of India. India is not an aggressive country. And so, from that respect, I mean, it's respected around the world. Look, the United States has always said what it wants to say, because we believe that it's in our best interest, whether it always makes sense or not. I mean, I'm a realist. I've seen the United States make plenty of mistakes around the world. But in the case of the Ukraine-Russia war, yeah, we don't want major nations buying Russian oil. It feeds their war machine. But if you notice, nothing happened after the United States said that. We continue to have strong relations with India, and those relations are going to continue because they're in the best interests of both nations.
Okay. Ambassador Ashok Sajjanar, again, the dichotomy of the war that is playing out between Ukraine and Russia, and if we don't mention NATO, then that is what the integral part and the integral reason why there is this war that has continued. Because if the buffer zone, which is Ukraine, is then removed and it becomes part of NATO, it is going to be an all-out war. And this is a criticality that NATO and United States of America are very, very well aware of, and refuse to get into an all-out war because they understand the consequences of it, but then use Ukraine as a prop, which is then ferrying the battle with Russia and getting pounded from both sides.
Yeah, thank you very much, Megha. Coming to the discussion that we are having in terms of what the United States has said, from Washington, D.C., from what has been said by the US Ambassador to India, I think whatever issues of such nature that are to be discussed, my only point is, what Prime Minister Modi has said also in these circumstances as far as relations between India and the United States is concerned. On several occasions, he has said it's a partnership of trust. And the same sentiment has been reiterated by the American side also. You would remember that, when Mr. Obama had come, he'd said it is one of the defining partnerships of the 21st century. And Mr. Biden has said this is, and his senior officers like Kurt Campbell, who is now the Deputy Secretary of State, they've said that the relationship with India is the most important relationship for the United States. The point I would like to make here is whatever they have to say about, their own understanding of Russia, that Russia is not going to be a reliable partner, etc., etc. I think these are issues which don't really need to be mentioned, up in the media and having a debate in the media over it. If you want to have discussions, if there is that sense of trust and confidence between the two countries, have these discussions behind closed doors. I think that is what the problem is that we find currently, that there are so many things, whether it is Mr. Blinken who's commenting upon the situation of the minorities within the country, in India, or if it is a report from the State Department of the United States talking about the freedom of religion in India. Now these are very galling commentaries. These are very jarring statements. You have made 2 points, and I think both of them are extremely valid points, Megha, and let me sort of, just very quickly respond to those. One is in terms of buying discounted Russian oil, which we started right from the time that the war started. We have been refining that oil and we have been supplying the global market with that oil. Even the United States has acknowledged and accepted that this is doing good for the world, because if India had not done it, the prices of oil would have gone through the roof. So they have in fact expressed gratitude and appreciation for what India is doing in terms of buying this oil. Because if India had not bought this oil, if India had also continued to buy the oil from the Middle East, the prices of oil would have gone up, which would have been very harmful. It would not have been harmful for Russia. It would not have been harmful for China. It would have been harmful for Europe. It would have been harmful for the global South. The second point that you make is in terms of buying defense equipment and other equipment from Russia. And again, we have made it very clear to the United States in our discussions that this is a legacy relationship. There was a time when, we were importing about 60%, 70% of our defense requirements from the Soviet Union and Russia. That was the time when the United States and the West was not prepared to supply these equipment to India. Today, when the situation has changed, that amount of imports that we are making from Russia, that has come down to about 45% or so. And we have started importing the very highly sophisticated equipment from the United States, from France, from Israel, and the others.
Yeah.
So I think these are discussions we need to have behind closed doors and not come out in the open, because it doesn't help anyone.
But
I think
the point, that's exactly the point that US time and again says, that it's saying, it says that if Russia were to pick one country, it would be China over India. Now, how do we justify that? Because like Ray said that, it's quite obvious. Is it that obvious?
Well, I think as far as Russia is concerned, I think it has to be acknowledged, it has really emerged over the last few years, over the last decade, I would say, since the time, the Crimea incident took place. And you had this whole horde of sanctions that were imposed on Russia. Russia has been pushed increasingly in the embrace of China. It has emerged now as a junior partner as far as China is concerned. So I would say that Russia, or the Soviet Union of the 70s and the 80s, it is not the Russia of today. It is a different Russia. So I think and there are changes that are taking place in the world.
Yeah.
India has to be mindful of those changes. If the United States is a much more diminished power than what it was in the 1990s, then we need to acknowledge that Russia is also a much more diminished power than what it was in the 1970s. And we need to take our decisions accordingly, which we are. And that is why we have the best of relations with the West. India has been invited to the G7 continuously for the last 5-6 years. And India is participating very actively in those deliberations.
Okay.
But India also wants to maintain its relations with Russia for its own interest and interest also, I think, of other countries.
Okay. All right. Sumit, how do you have to respond to these three developments that have taken place about the statement of the US State Department, the US envoy, and of course, parallelly, there has been an abstention that has once again been made by India over the demand made by majority of the nation. I think 60 nations have come together at the UNGA and once again demanding that ceasefire be initiated be addressed, be respected by Russia?
Meghaji, thank you for having me on your show. Let's put the things clear. Look, when you are the world's populous country, you have 1.4 billion people to feed. You have the youngest youth population in the world, and your economy is growing at the fastest rate. You determine your geopolitical maneuvers. I will call them maneuvers, and there are no permanent friends or enemies in geopolitics. You decide what is in the supreme interest of your nation, that is India. Unfortunately, Mr. Garcetti, the ambassador to India, has spoken the Chinese line, because Chinese were very irked when Prime Minister Modi went to Russia, and they were saying why the West is not reacting to it. I did not expect the US State Department and Mr. Garcetti to respond to it, because it's exactly what Chinese wanted you to do. Now, who is dictating whose terms? I don't know. That is for US to contemplate, but that doesn't change a lot of things in our sphere of things. Let me remind very humbly, United States of America, you are still importing, the Europe is still importing Russian oil. Now, you might get the oil from India or you might get from Turkey, but where does the Turkey buy the crude from? It buys from Russia. Is it wrong to say even today, all the reactors in United States of America are running on the uranium which they buy from Russia even today? So if they expect people like us who have saved $25 billion by buying Russian crude, and country like us, $25 billion is a lot of money. So why don't you stop buying your crude and your uranium for Russians and not enrich their war machine? The day you are able to do it, Mr. Garcetti and Mr. Jack Sullivan, then you tell us what to do. We might also consider your suggestions. Look, you cannot have one set of rules for you and you cannot have one set of rules for us. You cannot dictate the terms to us. You cannot tell us where to go, where not to go. Look, when it came at the United Nations, whenever there was a veto required for anything, who got this veto? Did the United States of America support us? No. It's always the Russians who came and support us. We have a 70 years of track record of relationship. We love Americans. We're great friends of them. We love Russians. We're great friends of them. So why is India put in a peculiar situation? Is either or. Now, let me remind the United States of America, where is your biggest threat coming from? It's not Vladimir Putin. It is Xi Jinping. But who is your second biggest trading partner or the first biggest trading partner? They keep on changing. It's People's Republic of China. Where you have the largest trade deficit in the world for last decade is People's Republic of China. Who is the biggest threat to the sovereignty of the United States of America? Is People's Republic of China. But why don't you stop working with the Chinese? Why are you giving Chinese the money which they are using to build more rockets and more arsenal to attack United States of America? Why is she using the biggest exercise? So, you have to preach what you practice. Otherwise, stop being the global teacher. Let things happen to their own, or course. And please, whenever you have to make these statements, they can be done with Dr. Jaishankar in closed doors, what the Ambassador Saab rightly said.
Okay.
It's not fair when you come and speak in the public, because if you speak in the public, there are also
there have been it's not just about Russia. There have been matters with regards to quote unquote religious indices, which are also discussed. You talk about what is happening with the terrorist that has been the extradition of the terrorist that has been designated by India for the past several years, Gurpatwant Singh Pannu. He is something that has also been raised by United States of America a number of times, and this is been shown in favor of Canada and the Khalistani secessionist movement that has been taking place and has been growing its tentacles not just in Canada but in UK and United States as well. So why not address those issues as well? Why play a one-sided card? Because I don't know, it suits your narrative, because you want to show your solidarity and support to your North American neighbor, which is Canada. Anyway, Pathikrit, coming back to you about the very pertinent statement that had been made by our External Affairs Minister, that Europe needs to come out of its mindset that its problems were the world's problems, but the world's problems were not Europe's problems.
Absolutely, Megha. Let me tell you first this, that we have a strong strategic partnership with the United States. There are major areas of collaboration and convergence, and we have high respect for the United States for several reasons. There are people-to-people connect, but I think it's important for Washington to come out of this binary mindset that either somebody is with them or against them. On the contrary, I think Washington should be very happy that there is one country, one of the major economies of the world, which has a functional relationship both with the West and Russia. Because everybody else has burnt their, bridges. Nobody else. I mean, if tomorrow push comes to a shove and the conflict goes beyond, breaches the threshold of the Ukrainian border, do you think the Russian president will pick up the phone of the German chancellor or the French president? They will not. He will not. So situation is very tense in Europe, and that has been created. So let me also say that when it suits the purpose of the Americans, they will say majoritarian, and they will say that a lot of things are being done in India which India should not do. And when it suits their purpose, they will say, look, you are a democracy, you should not go towards Russia. I mean, we are a mature democracy, we respect you, you should respect us. We are the largest democracy of the world, you are the oldest democracy. There has to be reciprocity of that respect. I mean, Russia per se is also a democracy. I mean, President Putin won it. And also, let's not forget, there are strong allegations, I'm only using the word allegations, about the kind of interference that came from the West when it comes to the election in this year in India. So let me also say, we have strong connection with United States. We respect United States for a lot of things, including the institutions they have created. But are we to forget what happened in 1971 and who stood beside us and who was against us? Are we to forget what happened in 1999 Kargil war, when Indian government asked for the GPS coordinates and that was denied by the government of United States? And that's the reason we had to create our own Navik, which is our own constellation of satellites for navigation purpose. Should we forget that? That's important, that we must not forget. So also, let me also say, I respect Ambassador Sajjanhar is always very, very nuanced in his approach. I must also add this, our relationship with Russia is not just a legacy issue. It is also about present, it is also about future. And there is a people-to-people connect. It is not just government of India dealing with government of Russia.
Okay.
It is people. You must go out. I would request the Americans, you must go out and understand from the social media the kind of bonhomie that exists. It does not mean at the cost of the Americans. We have great relation with the Americans also. So I think we need to look at from that perspective rather than presuming that everything comes from that binary.
Okay.
I think it's better that the world has moved on, the West must move on. You can't say that you can fund and arm Ukraine to the hilt, but nobody is supposed to even friend of Russia, forget about arming. That is not going to work anymore.
Okay,
and
all right.
that is where the issue of NATO comes.
Pathikrit made a very important point that at a time where you are at loggerheads with countries like Russia and China, and there is a single-minded narrative that America plays, it would be advantageous and helpful if a country like India, who has cordial association with Russia, can play a mediator, and this would help the West. Can you hear me, Ray?
Yeah, oh, you're asking me.
Yes.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I think the role India is playing in the world is an extremely valuable one. And the U.S.-Indian relationship is far greater than things that have been said over the last few days. The comments about 1971 are spot on. I mean, they're included in both the books I wrote about the Nixon administration and what the United States did there and how they let India be overrun by refugees from what was then East Pakistan. And they did that. President Nixon did that because he had a larger strategic interest that he wanted to take care of, and he didn't care what India thought. So, yeah, it's only logical that there are sore feelings about that. But look, every time I look around in the United States now, I see Indian Americans in greater positions of authority. They have tremendous influence in this country, and that's only going to get stronger as the two nations work together. So I think the time for the United States to keep telling India what to do is over. It should be over.
Okay.